Imagine walking home alone under the flickering buzz of a street lamp when a figure emerges from the shadows. The face is painted white with an exaggerated red smile that does not reach the cold, dead eyes. This is the primal fear of the clown, which has haunted the human psyche for decades. While usually reserved for nightmares or horror movies, there was a time when this terror stepped off the screen and into our backyards. The year was 2016, and the United States was gripped by a bizarre and terrifying phenomenon known as the Great Clown Panic. It was a time when mass hysteria blurred the lines between an internet prank and a genuine public safety threat, leaving an entire nation looking over its shoulder. The phenomenon did not start with a bang, but with a whisper in the humid heat of late summer. It began in the quiet city of Greenville, South Carolina, during the middle of August in 2016. The location was the Fleetwood Manor, apartments a modest residential complex surrounded by dense woods and family homes. Residents were going about their daily lives unaware that their community was about to become ground zero for a global news story. The atmosphere in the complex was normal until children started coming home with strange and unsettling stories. They spoke of clowns hiding in the tree line, whispering to them, and trying to lure them deep into the darkness of the forest. At first, the parents of Fleetwood Manor dismissed these tales as overactive childhood imaginations or attempts to get attention. However, the stories persisted and became increasingly specific and disturbing. The children claimed the clowns lived in an old house by a pond deep in the woods. They described the clowns holding chains and offering money or candy to anyone brave enough to follow them. The fear among the children was palpable and genuine enough to unsettle the adults. When a few adults claimed to have seen suspicious figures in the shadows, the dismissal turned into concern. The property management of the apartment complex felt compelled to act and issued a letter warning residents to be vigilant. The letter distributed to the residents of Fleetwood Manor was the spark that ignited the powder keg. It stated that the management had received multiple complaints of a person dressed as a clown trying to lure children into the woods. The letter explicitly warned that children should not be left alone at night and that the police had been notified. This piece of paper legitimized the fear. It was no longer just a playground rumor, but a documented security threat. The local police department in Greenville began receiving calls and officers were dispatched to patrol the area. They combed the woods and the perimeter of the complex, looking for any sign of the painted strangers. Despite the increased police presence and thorough searches of the wooded areas around Fleetwood Manor, no clowns were ever found. There were no chains and no money, and no abandoned house by a pond. The lack of physical evidence did not dampen the fear, but rather it seemed to amplify the mystery. If the police could not find them, it meant the clowns were elusive and smart, which made them even more terrifying. The story was picked up by local news outlets in South Carolina, and the image of a clown lurking in the woods near a playground proved too sensational to ignore. The reports began to circulate on social media platforms, spreading the localized fear to a much wider audience. As the calendar turned to September, the sightings began to migrate beyond the borders of South Carolina. Reports of creepy clowns started popping up in North Carolina and Georgia and Alabama. The descriptions were often similar to the Greenville incidents, involving clowns standing silently on roadsides or emerging from tree lines. Some reports escalated the threat level, claiming the clowns were wielding knives or machetes. The phenomenon was behaving like a virus jumping from town to town through the vector of the internet. Every new sighting reported on the news inspired copycats and pranksters in neighboring states to don costumes and terrify their own communities. Social media played a critical and undeniable role in the rapid escalation of the panic. Platforms like Twitter and Facebook became flooded with blurry photos and shaky videos of alleged clown sightings. A dedicated account on Twitter named Clown Sightings gained hundreds of thousands of followers in a matter of weeks. The account retweeted unverified claims and ominous warnings, creating a feedback loop of terror. Teenagers and young adults saw the attention these posts garnered and realized that participating in the trend was a shortcut to viral fame. The line between a genuine threat and a staged performance for likes and shares completely evaporated. The panic began to have real-world consequences for public institutions, particularly schools. Across the United States, schools were placed on lockdown due to threats made by clown-themed accounts on social media. Principals and superintendents found themselves sending letters home to parents assuring them that student safety was a priority. In some districts, attendance dropped significantly as parents refused to send their children to school out of fear. The clown panic was disrupting the education system and draining police resources, as law enforcement agencies were forced to investigate every threat, no matter how ridiculous it seemed on the surface. Law enforcement officers were placed in a difficult and frustrating position during the height of the hysteria. They had to take every threat seriously to ensure public safety, but the vast majority of calls were hoaxes or hallucinations. Police departments issued statements warning that filing false reports was a crime, and that dressing as a clown to terrorize people could lead to dangerous misunderstandings. They feared that a prankster jumping out at the wrong person could result in a tragedy if the victim was armed and acted in self-defense. The tension between the police and the pranksters was growing with every passing night. By October of 2016, the clown panic had reached a fever pitch and spread to the West Coast and beyond. It was no longer an isolated Southern phenomenon, but a national crisis. In Pennsylvania, hundreds of students from Penn State University formed a mob to hunt for a clown that was rumored to be on campus. The scene was surreal, with students running through the streets chanting and searching for a phantom enemy. This marked a dangerous shift from passive fear to active aggression. The public was no longer just hiding from the clowns. They were organizing vigilante groups to find and hurt them. The visual aspect of the panic was heavily influenced by the archetype of the evil clown in popular culture. The clowns being reported did not look like the friendly circus performers of the past. They were modeled after horror movie villains, with jagged teeth and dirty costumes and chaotic hair. This aesthetic choice was deliberate and designed to tap into the specific phobia known as coulrophobia. The pranksters knew exactly what buttons to push to elicit a visceral reaction from the public. They were leveraging decades of horror media to turn peaceful suburban neighborhoods into live-action movie sets. As the sightings continued, fringe theories began to emerge, attempting to explain the sudden proliferation of clowns. One popular theory was that the entire phenomenon was a guerrilla marketing campaign for the upcoming remake of the movie, it based on the novel by Stephen King. The timing seemed suspicious as the movie was in production, and the character Pennywise is the ultimate evil clown. However, the production studio and Stephen King himself vehemently denied any involvement. King even took to Twitter to ask people to cool down the hysteria, stating that most clowns are good and cheer up children. The professional clowning community was devastated by the panic and the negative publicity. Legitimate children's entertainers found their bookings canceled and their livelihoods threatened. People who made a living bringing joy to birthday parties were suddenly viewed as monsters and potential predators. Professional clown organizations issued press releases condemning the scary clown trend and trying to distance themselves from the pranksters. They argued that a person in a rubber mask terrorizing people is not a clown, but a criminal. Their pleas, however, were largely drowned out by the noise of the hysteria. The psychological mechanics behind the 2016 clown panic are a classic example of mass hysteria or collective delusion. This occurs when a group of people spontaneously manifest the same fears and symptoms, often triggered by a vague threat. The uncertainty of the time combined with the echo chamber of social media created a fertile ground for this delusion to take root. People were primed to see clowns in the shadows, so their brains interpreted ambiguous visual data as clowns. A white trash bag blowing in the wind or a person in a bright jacket could easily be misidentified as a threat. Comparisons were drawn to historical instances of mass panic, such as the Mad Gasser of Mattoon in the 1940s. In that case, residents of an Illinois town believed they were being attacked by a gas-wielding intruder despite a lack of physical evidence. Just like the clown panic, the Mad Gasser incident was fueled by local news reports and gossip. The human mind is powerful and suggestible, capable of creating a reality that aligns with its deepest fears. The 2016 clown panic was simply a modern digital iteration of this timeless human vulnerability. The danger escalated when weapons began to enter the narrative on both sides. In some incidents, the people dressing as clowns were reported to be carrying baseball bats or knives to enhance the terror. In retaliation, citizens began carrying concealed weapons while walking their dogs or patrolling their neighborhoods. There were reports of shots being fired into the air to scare off trespassers, and police officers were on high alert for an armed confrontation. It was a miracle that the autumn of 2016 did not result in a significant loss of life due to these encounters. The phenomenon eventually crossed international borders, proving that fear is a universal language. Sightings were reported in Canada and the United Kingdom and Australia, and even Brazil. In the United Kingdom, the trend was dubbed the killer clown craze, and police forces there issued similar warnings to their American counterparts. The global spread demonstrated how interconnected the world had become through the internet. A prank started by teenagers in South Carolina could inspire a copycat in a small town in England within a matter of days. One of the most perplexing aspects of the investigation was the difficulty in catching the perpetrators. While there were arrests made, the number of confirmed clowns was tiny compared to the thousands of sightings reported. This discrepancy suggests that the vast majority of sightings were indeed hallucinations or fabrications. When pranksters were caught, they were often teenagers looking for attention or adults with poor judgment. They were charged with disorderly conduct or wearing a mask in public, which is illegal in some jurisdictions, specifically to prevent this kind of terror. The panic reached its absolute zenith just before Halloween of 2016. The holiday provided a convenient excuse for wearing costumes, and the sales of evil clown masks skyrocketed. Schools and local governments issued bans on clown costumes for Halloween parades and trick-or-treating events. There was a genuine fear that a real attacker could hide in plain sight among the revelers. Parents were on edge, and the usual joy of the holiday was dampened by the lingering threat of the phenomenon. The atmosphere was thick with tension as the sun set on October 31st. Then, almost as quickly as it had begun, the great clown panic of 2016 evaporated. Once Halloween passed, the sightings dropped off precipitously. The media cycle moved on to the heated presidential election, which was taking place in November of that year. The clowns were pushed off the front page by political scandals and voting results. Without the oxygen of media attention and the viral spread on social media, the pranksters lost their motivation. The collective spell was broken, and the nation woke up from its fever dream. In the aftermath, analysts and sociologists tried to make sense of what had happened. They looked at the cultural climate of 2016, a year marked by political polarization and social unrest. Some argued that the clowns were a manifestation of societal anxiety, a physical embodiment of the fear of the other. The clown is a liminal figure, neither happy nor sad, neither human nor monster. It represents the unknown, and in a year of great uncertainty, the clown became the perfect avatar for the public's anxieties. The legal consequences for those who were caught were relatively minor, but served as a deterrent for future copycats. Most offenders received community service or small fines. However, the social stigma was significant. Being identified as one of the people who contributed to the panic brought shame and ridicule. The police made it clear that they would not tolerate such behavior in the future, and laws regarding wearing masks in public were reinforced in several states. The justice system treated the phenomenon as a public nuisance rather than a grand criminal conspiracy. The legacy of the 2016 clown panic persists in the way we view viral trends and internet challenges. It served as a stark warning about the power of social media to incite real-world chaos. It showed how quickly misinformation can travel and how easily rational people can succumb to herd mentality. The incident is now studied in psychology and media classes as a textbook case of digital mass hysteria. It remains a bizarre footnote in American history, a time when the entire country was afraid of the dark. Interestingly, the phenomenon did not disappear completely, but rather went dormant. There have been sporadic reports of clown sightings in the years since 2016, but none have reached the same level of viral intensity. The inoculation of the public seems to have worked to some degree. We are now more skeptical of blurry photos and sensational claims. We recognize the pattern and are less likely to fall for the same trick twice. However, the image of the clown remains tainted, forever associated with this period of collective madness. The impact on the entertainment industry was also notable. The movie it released in 2017 went on to become one of the highest-grossing horror movies of all time. It is likely that the clown panic of the previous year contributed to the film's massive success by keeping the scary clown trope at the forefront of the public consciousness. The fear had been primed, and the movie provided a safe outlet to release that tension. Art imitated life, and life imitated art in a strange symbiotic cycle of horror. For the residents of Fleetwood Manor in Greenville, South Carolina, life eventually returned to normal. The woods are just woods again, and the children play outside without fear of whispering strangers. The police patrols have long since ceased, and the warning letters are just fading memories. Yet for those who lived through those first few weeks, the memory of the fear is hard to shake. They were the first to see the face of the panic, and their stories sparked a global firestorm. They remained the unwilling pioneers of this strange historical event. The clown panic also exposed the vulnerability of local news ecosystems. Small-town reporters under pressure to generate clicks and views often amplified unverified reports without proper scrutiny. This contributed to the speed at which the panic spread. In the years following, newsrooms have had to grapple with how to cover viral trends responsibly, without adding fuel to the fire. The balance between informing the public and preventing hysteria is a delicate one that was lost during the autumn of 2016. Looking back, the most terrifying aspect of the clown panic was not the clowns themselves, but the reaction of the public. The mobs of students hunting for enemies and the armed citizens patrolling streets showed a dark side of human nature. It demonstrated how quickly civilization can fray at the edges when fear is introduced. The clowns were merely a catalyst, revealing the underlying tension and aggression that exists just beneath the surface of polite society. As we reflect on this strange chapter of true crime history, we are left with a lingering question. Was there ever a real threat, Or was it all a ghost story we told ourselves? While there were pranksters in masks, there is no evidence of a coordinated ring of predators. The true monster was the collective imagination of a society connected by high-speed internet, but disconnected from reality. The clowns were a mirror reflecting our own capacity for irrational fear. The Great Clown Panic of 2016 stands as a cautionary tale for the digital age. It reminds us to question what we see on our screens and to remain calm in the face of rumors. It teaches us that fear is contagious, but so is rationality. As time passes, the year of the clown becomes a strange anecdote. We tell at parties a moment when the world went slightly mad. But deep down, we all know that if the conditions were right, it could happen again. So the next time you see a shadow stretch across the pavement or hear a twig snap in the woods, do not let your mind race to the worst conclusion. Remember the autumn of 2016 and the phantom clowns that held a nation hostage. The darkness is usually empty, and the monsters are usually just men in masks. But keep a watchful eye regardless, because history has a strange way of repeating itself when we least expect it.